Let's begin. Welcome to the Panic Room. It is the 31st of March. It is 11 o'clock in East Sydney, so I'm having my coffee and Steve is having his breakfast. Steve, we're going to talk about what we're actually going to do today in this 10 minutes, but why are you wearing a feather duster on your head?
A feather duster? I'm wearing a red bandana on my head today. I'm looking all piratey, and Wilson is my parrot, my pirate parrot. I have my trusty sword. We're doing that because we're going to look at someone who's quite a famous Australian who wears a red bandana, and he has a bit to say often about how bad religion is, and Christianity in particular. And Dave's going to talk us through that. And this guy is known as the Red Bandana, and he has problems with Christianity today because of coronavirus. Over to you, Dave.
We will come back to him, but I've got to, we have to do this story. I mean, you know, you're in a crisis and sometimes gallows humor does help. But I think this is what they say, LOL, just an absolute laugh out loud story. Let's see if we can put it up on the screen. This is the headline of the year. I cannot see anyone matching this headline. Astrophysicist gets magnet stuck up nose while inventing coronavirus device. He's an Australian astrophysicist. He's in Melbourne, of course, not Perth or Sydney. He's 27 years old. I think he got a bit bored at home and he decided to see if he would set up something that would stop you touching your face, which is apparently a really, really bad idea. So he got a bit bored with it and he started clipping the magnets to his nose, and two of them went up and he thought he would get them out. He put other magnets up to get them out, except they attracted to each other, and then he kind of ran out of magnets. He got this idea from Google, which from an 11-year-old boy. He says, "My partner took me to the hospital that she works in because she wanted all her colleagues to laugh at me. The doctors thought it was quite funny, making comments like this is an injury due to self-isolation and boredom." He had to have an anesthetic spray and then the magnets taken out of his nose. Steve, do you love that story?
Well, I think it's hilarious, and it's not an attractive look, but I guess if you're a doctor and you're Googling stuff, you're Googling Dr. Google to see what you should do, and you take advice from an 11-year-old, you know, the doctors in this country would be ashamed of that. But it's funny. I mean, there's more stories are going to come out like that. It's like, you know, as we get more bored in this lockdown, which is very cute at the moment, we're going to try and find ways to injure ourselves, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, actually, there is a serious side to that as well. I was just reading in the news today that there have been 9 people killed in domestic violence in the UK since the lockdown started. And I suspect the same thing will be true in Australia, in the United States and elsewhere. But look, we are going to come on to something serious, but this red bandana guy, this is what he writes, or at least he writes at other times. But tell us who he is, Steve. For those of us who don't know who this gentleman is, Fitz on Sunday, who is he?
Yes, Pete, have we got it? There he is. Peter, he looks just like me, except I look more dynamic. This is Peter FitzSimons. I think it's pronounced FitzSimons. And he writes in a lot of books in Australia. So he's written stuff on the Kokoda Trail and different things. And I wonder if he's got a ghostwriter, but his pet hate is religion, and his chief pet hate within that is Christianity. And he's not exactly the sharpest theological toolbox in the shed, because he sets up a straw man of Christianity and then knocks it down. So he's come out with something about the coronavirus, and I thought I'd wear a red bandana in honor of him today. I'm with my trusty sword, and my Wilson is a parrot today. And I wonder, Dave, what is Peter FitzSimons saying in his article that we find a bit curious?
Okay, well, we've got about 6 minutes, and they're big issues. I always find him frustrating, stimulating, and annoying.
Bit like me.
He's a bit like you. You could be twins, actually, you guys. So I've actually written a piece about this that we're going to put up on we're going to put into the Panic Room, because I've written a more substantive response for those who are interested. First of all, he's got some good news. So good news about the coronavirus in Australia. Do you know what that is, by the way?
The good news? You tell us the good news. Is it trending down?
It's trending down. It's going down. By the way, someone says they've got a question on the chat thing on the Q&A. Please feel free to put it in. If we can't answer it just now, we'll answer it later if your question makes any sense to us. Yeah, he's got good news about that. And it is quite remarkable, and I hope it continues. For 3 days in a row, the number of new cases has decreased, and we hope that that continues. He also says that Corona is going to be a seismic event, and I think that's true, although I do question whether in a year's time we'll be looking back and going, what was all the fuss about? You know, let's get your prophecy on this. What do you think in a year's time we'll be doing? Going, this is the event that changed the world, or what was that all about?
Well, we've said that about a lot of events, and it will change some things. It'll actually make us more nervous, I think, about what we do. But it's certainly setting us up for the next one. Whatever the next virus that comes out, we will go into probably panic room mode a little quicker and probably lock down things a little quicker. So what we can't afford is some fits and starts where you get too many of these things happening because we will start to go into panic mode. How it will change us? I mean, China's gone back to normal in some respects. China didn't release 1 million Uyghurs who were locked up because they decided that the world changed, and they're still going on doing business as usual in many of the places that were locked down. So well, let's wait and see, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he has this idea that one of the things that's going to happen is that mainstream religion will decline because I mean, this is quite bizarre. I mean, it's what he wishes to happen because he says the elderly will die because of COVID. And he obviously anticipates that it's the elderly who are religious. He sounds like one of these, you know, Remainers in the UK saying, well, when the elderly die, we'll all go back into the EU. I mean, almost a delight in it. Do you, I mean, what would your response be to that?
Well, for the first thing you'd have to say is that if you read Greg Sheridan's book on God is Good for You, the places of white hot religion or where people take it seriously, people are much younger, they're much more educated. And if you look across Asia and Africa and South America, it's younger people that are becoming Christian. And it's also, you'd have to say that, you know, my dad died in an aged care facility a few years ago, and it wasn't full of elderly people who actually believed in Jesus or anything like, or were religious in particular at all. So there's a generation that's actually quite anti-religious who are a little bit older as well. So I think FitzSimons is clutching at straws there. And it is a caricature. He thinks that somehow older people are more religious. Not necessarily the case. And that's what you'd think too?
It is what I think as well. And I also think he brings up the question of a benevolent God. Now, given that he's a guy who writes history, the idea that COVID-19 would cause us to disbelieve in God more than, say, the Antonine Plague of AD 165, the bubonic plague of the 14th century, the Spanish flu of 1919, the London Plague of 1625, we could go on and we could go on. But the whole concept of the benevolent God, that's hugely important, because if you believe in a God who is only going to ever give you good things, he doesn't exist. So yes, that sets up a caricature, but the God of the Bible is very, very different. He also talks about Twitter's engagement with the Archbishop of Canterbury as proof of decline. Apparently the Archbishop of Canterbury only had 1,500 engagements. Well, I'm going to trump that. One of my last tweets had 25,000 engagements. So that proves God exists. Does that work for you, Steve?
Well, couldn't possibly say how many engagements my Twitter account has. I wouldn't want to tie it to whether God exists. But it's interesting that the whole Christian message is that we have a God who suffers with us. In the person of Jesus, he suffered on the cross. So the idea that somehow God is removed distantly from suffering, and A, doesn't understand it, or B, doesn't care about it. If he thought that people hadn't thought about suffering before the 21st century and still come up with the idea that God exists, he's probably not done as much history as he should have.
Yeah, exactly. I find it delicious. I mean, maybe we'll finish with this for today, but just two things. Romans 8 talks about the whole creation suffering, and then talks about God works for good in all things for those who love him, which is a tremendous reassurance that we as Christians have. In this article, I don't know if you can see the headline there, but the headline, I'm not sure that Peter Fitz, your colleague, your twin, put it this way, But the headline says, when virus cases start coming down, we can start looking up. But that's what we're saying. We should be looking up anyway. This panic room has a glass ceiling that we can look up and look out to the God who did suffer with us and the God who helps us in our suffering. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're not going to tell you what we're doing, basically, because we don't know. We're just responding to the situation as it comes. However, we had one burning question. Is it okay? Do you mind if I answer this? Steve?
Answer the question. You can answer the question. I'm only here.
I'll answer the question before we go. Someone is politely requesting, why is my forehead so big? Which I think is a key question in all of this. And the answer is because I have 2 brains and I just need the extra space. So thank you for asking so politely and nicely. It's always good to have people engage constructively in this manner. Steve, I'm going to say goodbye. You got anything to say?
Avast ye hearties.
See you tomorrow, guys. God bless.